Hello and welcome back to the Confidentially Insecure podcast. So, it's the first time Confidentially Insecure welcomes a guest to the show. The idea of this podcast started with a note on my iPhone, and this man is someone who I wanted to have on from the start. As a result, it is an absolute honour and a privilege to have him as the first guest on the show. As a person, I couldn't think any higher of him. He is the most kind, compassionate and patient person I've ever met. He sums up everything that the 21st century man should be. It's such a pleasure to welcome someone who I clearly look up to, and fortunately, someone I call a close friend, Barnaby Head, to the Confidentially Insecure podcast. How you doing, mate?
I'm good. Wow, thank you. That's like a very good opening.
I'm sure.
Thank you.
That's fine, mate. That's fine. It's befitting of the person. So we're just going to start off with some quick questions about Barnaby. So, favourite food?
Favourite food? Garlic prawns. Sizzling garlic.
Sizzling garlic prawns. Favourite colour?
Green.
Favourite animal?
Elephant. I think that's to be an elephant.
If you could have a 5-minute conversation with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
It's going to be really soppy, but I'd have to say my granddad. Because I'd like to. Does that count?
That's fine.
That's fine.
No. It's your show, mate.
Just asking things that maybe I didn't have the time, or I wasn't old enough to ask.
To understand it first time, and that's fine. That's a really cool answer. I'm sure we'll come back to that in first. And then the question that's going around the internet at the moment: Are you a doors or a wheels man?
I am a wheels person, but as an architect, I've dealt with a lot of doors. Or as a student architect, I've dealt with a lot of doors. So it was difficult for me to come to terms with.
I'm sure
but the one thing that swayed me was conveyor belts, or so any industrial conveyor belt has thousands upon thousands of wheels, as far as I'm aware. So that's what swayed it for me.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about the conveyor belt. I always think of office blocks is what
office
gets
blocks,
me.
yeah.
Because there's got to be a hell of a lot of doors in an office block. But I guess by the same logic, there'll be some conveyor belts in there as well.
Yeah, and also desk chairs, right?
Yes,
sat on the desk chair at the moment. Has six wheels on it.
Ironically, Barnaby and I are both sat on a pair of desk chairs at the moment whilst we're having this conversation. So maybe Barnaby's got me there. There's only one door that I can see. There are plenty of wheels. But yeah, I'm sticking to the doors policy. So as I say, thank you very much for coming on. First guest.
No worries.
Are you feeling good? Are you feeling excited?
I'm nervous. I will not lie, but I guess that's part of the reason for coming on.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're just.
So hopefully I'll keep you at ease with my maybe subpar interviewing skills, but we'll see. We're both going on this journey together. We're losing our podcast double act virginity together.
Indeed.
So hopefully you guys can stick along for that journey with us. So the first thing I wanna look at is let's go back to the beginning. Do you want to share something about growing up in a small village in Devon?
Yes. So I think I had a really fortunate childhood. So little village. I think basically everyone knew everyone. It was basically its own bubble. My grandma is about a 2-minute walk down the road, and my best friends at the time were about 30 seconds down the road. My primary school was a minute down the road, and everyone knew everyone. It was just, as I said, its own little bubble, and I think that had its advantages and disadvantages. I think from a very early age I knew what sort of a great sense of community felt like. I felt included and I felt safe in my comfort zone. But that, as you'll sort of hear, I think, in the second topic, did have its disadvantages. But overall, I've been very, very fortunate. And yeah, it's something I'm always going to appreciate. Forever, really. But yeah.
So from that, you've given quite a glowing description of growing up. But as you say, that you think there might be some disadvantages to that. I mean, I grew up in a similar environment. I grew up in a fairly small town on the Hampshire-Dorset border, so just a little bit further up the east.
Did you enjoy that? Do you think it was the sort of the ideal location for growing up?
Hang on, whose podcast are yours or mine? Mate? Honestly, if you keep asking questions like this,
it's all about comparison, isn't it? Come on.
It is. Well, yeah, as I say, it had its benefits. It wasn't quite as small as Denver. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to visit there just the one time, but hope there'll be some more times along in the future. I quite liked growing up where I grew up. It was quite, as you say, it was quite secluded. It was quite nice. It was fairly quiet. I did feel at times it was a little like I was missing out on something that I think other people who have grown up in bigger cities have since told me that maybe I missed out on something. But the thing with growing up, I think, is that you accept whatever you have as everyone has that,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think certainly coming to university has really opened my eyes
yeah.
to those possibilities.
The other thing I should mention, I was a very self-preserved person when I was younger. So I never ever wanted to ride a scooter, ride a bike. I didn't want to do anything that would put me in danger. So climbing trees was a big no-no. Uh, I didn't even like go, what is it, sledging when it snowed.
Okay.
I didn't want to do anything like that. And obviously I regret it now, but at the time, I was very, very adamant that I would not do any of this out of my comfort zone stuff. Again, maybe because of the very secluded environment I was in. And again, as you said, there were a lot of things that I know other people were doing at the time that, were completely alien to me. I couldn't just go into town, for example. I'd have to catch a bus, and the bus was only once every 30 minutes if you were lucky. Some days it didn't even run, so yeah.
For sure. So what you're saying is that there were some drawbacks to living in such a small place.
Yes, yeah.
What I'm really interested in is, especially from a confidentially insecure standpoint, is how those drawbacks had an impact on you, sort of emotionally and mentally and the like.
Yeah, so I mean, this would definitely pop up in question two, where we talk about sort of secondary school.
Well, this is question two.
Oh, is it? Oh, perfect. Well, so going from my primary school, which was about 100 people in the whole school, and everyone knew everyone. If you weren't invited to a birthday party, then it was very, very bad. Put it like that. But suddenly moving to secondary school that had over 1,500 people, and people that had been exposed to swear words. I'd never heard a swear word before till that time, and all of these little things that I felt so different about. I didn't fit in at all, and I really struggled during secondary school. It was a really difficult time for me. I would quite frequently get sort of panic attacks and stuff, just because of situations I wasn't comfortable in. As I said, I wasn't that much of a risk taker, so anything that sort of highlighted me or brought me out into the crowds, I was not a fan of, and I found everyone to be rude and scary. And I think actually, in some ways, they were just having, well, quote unquote banter or whatever. At the time, I didn't understand what that was at all. So yeah, it was a real struggle, and being in that isolated environment from the start, although it had so many benefits, I don't think it helped me um, in secondary school particularly. But yeah.
That's a great answer to that question. It sounds a lot like I was the kid who bullied you at secondary school, which probably doesn't paint me in a very good light. But anyway,
Oh.
I'm interested to see that you hadn't heard of sort of swearing or explicit language, because my parents swore at me from a fairly young age.
Yeah, no.
And that's not really a drawback of my parents. I think that's sort of the era that they grew up in. They're quite sort of, like, my mum was very working class growing up. I think that's sort of rubbed off in the language that I use and the language that they use for me. I'm just interested to hear that wasn't used even when you were sort of being a bit of a prick as a kid.
Well, I think that's the thing. I was very, very well behaved, so I don't think, not to toot my own horn, but I was very, very well behaved. But so yeah, they had no real use for it. I think the worst my dad ever said was bloody hell, and that was it.
Okay.
And every Sunday I'd go to church with my gran. She was very strict with swearing, etc. Even though we got taught this whole Bible story, which I think is a bit, a bit
Well,
out there.
yeah.
But Yes, it was. Yeah, no one, even no one in primary school had really been exposed to it either, because again, we all knew each other. We were all living very close together, so if no one knew it, so it was never going to be spread. I think the worst was someone did the two finger salute, I think, near the end of primary school. I had no clue what it was. So when I was walking home from primary school, um, whilst my mum wasn't looking and a car was driving past, I'd do the two finger salute to the car, having absolutely no clue what it meant. So all of these cars were just getting flipped off by me.
That's a great story. That if that doesn't sum it up, then I don't know what does. So you moved to a fairly broad secondary school, and then I assume that the jump to university was broader again still.
Yes, so after secondary school, I went to A levels. I enjoyed that a lot more, simply because
Okay.
everyone wanted to be there. I think that was the difference. I love learning new things, and I think secondary school there are a lot of people that just didn't want to be there, and as such were disruptive and were not my type of people. So to go to A levels was great for me. In terms of university, I was dead set against it. Um, I'm guessing you've watched the movie Grease.
I've seen Greece many a time.
Great.
My manly man in me supposed to say I should have. I'm a big Greece fan.
No.
Not so many. No,
So when I was fairly young, I watched Grease for the first time, and obviously it was in a sort of American university setting.
indeed.
But from that point onwards, I thought every single university was exactly like Greece. So I thought it would have all of these guys in leather jackets doing drag races in these. Yeah, the thought just terrified me. I was like, "There's no way I'm going to fit in with all of these people." Um, and so yeah, I was dead set against it. I didn't have the social skills, being honest, and the fact being by myself, not knowing anyone, was exceedingly nerve-wracking for me. So no, it was a big no-no at the time. I think later on in secondary school, um, my sister was sort of halfway through a university degree, so I think that sort of sibling competitiveness kind of pushed me towards it.
For sure.
And at the time, I had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do. I ended up doing a level 3 BTEC in engineering, so I knew it was something around there. But yeah, I had no clue. So to do an apprenticeship was basically impossible. So I had to go to university. And here I am.
And here you are, indeed. Well, you touched on every question I was going to ask in that. You said you're quite dead set against it, but you gave lots of reasons as to why you've changed your mind. So I'm just going to move on. I mean, the first time I met you, you were doing business management and economics, and if I'm remembering correctly, that wasn't even the first degree that you chose. And we met fairly early on in the university procedure, if you like.
Yes, yeah. So the first course I was going to do was quantity surveying. Uh, I think because it's engineering based, but I also enjoyed sort of statistics and numbers. So I don't know why I liked statistics and numbers. I now hate them, but at the time I did, and I thought, great, that's what I want to do. And then so I applied to all of these universities to do quantity surveying, and then just as I was getting my sort of applications for these universities, I realised I had my doubts. So at the very last second, I thought, well, maybe I enjoy the more business side of quantity surveying because it's right in the middle between sort of engineering and business, where you're counting. Well, you're counting bricks, to put it really, really simply, and so calculating the costs and stuff like that. So I thought maybe it was the business side, and I ended up going to my first lecture, probably in the same room as you, potentially.
Yes, I think that must have been the case because I started off on the business management and economics course, and
Yeah.
then moved to economics a little bit later on.
So yeah, we were probably less than 5 meters away from each other. We
didn't
didn't even know.
it. Now
Uh,
here we are doing podcasts.
yeah, exactly. So anyway, turned up to that first lecture, and halfway through, I knew this was not the course for me. So out I went, and kind of sat in my bedroom and wondered what the hell I wanted to do. Um, and I think, sort of looking back on, where I've been fortunate fortunate enough to go on quite a few like amazing holidays to some amazing places, and I was always drawn to the buildings, especially. And so suddenly architecture popped up, and I emailed them. They talked to me, sat me down and talked to me about it, and I have been there ever since. So 3 years in, so architecture degree, 2 years left. So the long haul, but I'm really enjoying it. So I'm so glad I took my time to reevaluate what I wanted to do.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, so crazy. And I apologise to any quantity surveyors who might be listening out there saying that Barnaby quoting is just counting bricks.
Apologies.
Exactly, yeah. Well, there are any quantity surveyors, but we'd love to have you. We'd love to hear from you. And we'd love to hear your opinions on what quantity is saying is rather than just counting bricks. So, as I said earlier, Barnaby and I met pretty early on in the university pathway, and I think we essentially met for ultimate frisbee. So I'm gonna start asking you about how you started playing ultimate frisbee. Then you can feel free to return the question.
Okay.
So how did you start into the ultimate journey?
One name in particular stands out, and that's Adam.
The same Adam I spoke about last week.
The exact same Adam you spoke about last week. Yes, he decided that he wanted to try it out. I was not against the idea because I had played it in secondary school briefly, and it was a lot of fun actually. So yeah, we all tagged along the whole flat really. I'm pretty sure there at least 5 of us went potentially, and it was really really good fun. I could not believe how much energy it burned. I've played tennis for about 10 years now, and it was nowhere near the physical endurance of Ultimate Frisbee. It was crazy. But going sort of back to actually joining Ultimate Frisbee, I think actually it was a lot because I was too anxious to go to any other sport by myself. Like even when the first Freshers Fair, when we were fortunate enough to have it in person, I didn't want to go in by myself, and there were all of these people like trying to beckon me towards their tables. I found it really overwhelming. So again, one of the reasons I joined Ultimate Frisbee was actually because of anxiety in the first place. But I think I'm so glad I did, and I've stuck with it because it's a really enjoyable sport, and I've met some amazing people, and I'm looking forward to continuing it. But yeah,
For sure. So you touched a little bit there on anxiety. Do you think if 21-year-old Barnaby, 21?
22?
22-year-old Barnaby walked into the fresh fair, do you think you'd have a little more confidence than you did at 19?
Definitely, yeah. My confidence has skyrocketed since university. My independence has skyrocketed. There's so many things I could do that I couldn't do. I've done a presentation in front of sort of 45 people. I would never ever have done that sort of a year or two ago. That would have been a panic attack right there, and I probably would have called in sick or just not turned up. Being completely honest, but I think it helped. It helped to know that everyone else was also just as nervous as I was, and actually I ended up looking like the more confident person, and I think that gave me a real confidence boost. And now I almost act like the confident person. So it's all the sort of persona, if you like. Yeah, no, it's been a tremendous help. Yeah, I'm really pleased with the progress I've made.
That's brilliant. That's everything that confidential skill wants to talk about. And the fact you've just mentioned there that you felt like the unconfident person, transitioned to being the confident person, yet you still can talk so eloquently and so openly about how you weren't the confident person. That just shows how cyclical it is in nature, and none of us are ever actually very confident with who we are, as I touched on in episode 3. So if you want to go back and check out episode 3, you can do that right now. So how did I start in Ultimate Frisbee? Barney was going to ask me, but I guess he forgot. That's all right, mate. That's all right. I knew I wanted to touch on it a little bit and tell this story. So my dad and I went to a university open day in Winchester. We saw them playing Ultimate Frisbee, and as my dad commented, "Oh, that's a mixed sport now. I'm sure you can meet a few young ladies there. And unfortunately, it hasn't quite turned out like that, has it, Barnaby? Now I just throw 175 grams of plastic to other people who I already know. So thank you very much for that one, Dan. It was nice that you made an attempt, but unfortunately, it hasn't quite paid off how we all envisaged it, shall we say?
I love the contrast between us two joining
Exactly.
the sport, our different motives.
Exactly. So yeah, that's why I started playing ultimate frisbee, and Barnley joined for slightly morally better reasons. And that's segues nicely into my next point. I mean, it was really clear for me to start off with that Barnaby and I are incredibly different people. Yes, we've got our similarities, and absolutely, I think we're potentially almost two sides of a very similar coin. I'd love to hear what you'd have to think of that statement.
I I am inclined to disagree to a certain extent. There have been, I, I think, a lot of, say, my moral high ground or my kindness is put down more to just me wanting to be a good person, but also I was thinking about this at sort of 11 p.m. when you sent me over these questions, which I was going through, and I kind of realised that it's kind of my kindness is kind of a bit of a defense mechanism. I hate conflict. I really hate conflict, and I will do nearly anything to. It's back to self-preservation. I'll do nearly anything to try and avoid it, and being a nice person seems to be one of the best ways of avoiding it. If you're kind to someone, they're more inclined to be nice back, and that's the way it works. And you've done some really nice things, really kind things. I think how we differ is maybe the sort of our, the persona we may want to give out. Um, I but in fact, in a similar, we do it in a similar way again. We both like to be the Joker. We both enjoy making people laugh. Or that's our sort of
Defense mechanism.
yes,
Yes,
another
yeah.
defense mechanism again. Um, so I think there's a lot more similarities there than maybe you give us credit for. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
As I said in the opening statement, if you like, your your strengths are certainly my weaknesses, I feel. And I think if I was more like you, I'd probably do a little bit better in the leadership, friendship, relationship bracket. And that's something that I'm working on in my personal life. And I'm interested to know whether you had a sort of like epiphany where you discovered that this kind, compassionate nature is something that's worth working on, or if you had to develop it in some way, or whether that was kind of due to your fairly not mundane, your your fairly kind, nice upbringing. Not to say that I didn't have a nice upbringing. If anyone is listening, I had a lovely childhood, but it's just different to other people's. And that's more what I'm trying to.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
a lot of it has stemmed from my upbringing. As I said, I went to church every Sunday. I'm not a religious person, but the actual teachings, without the politics in between, I think the messages are really good. And I agree with a lot of them, like love thy neighbor being, the popular one. Um, and again, I've everyone has always been kind to me there up until secondary school, which is why it was such a weird transition. Um, but I don't know. I've always had sort of compliments about how kind I am, how nice I am, and it makes you feel good. And
Oh, definitely.
yeah, and I think it's something that I'm really happy about, and obviously I want to keep it. On the conversely, however, I feel like if I had a bit more of you, a bit more confidence, a bit more
A
sort
bit more fake bravado, you mean?
of.
It's not confidence, I'll tell you that now.
I mean, you have.
Otherwise, I would call it insecure, confidential insecure.
Yeah, I guess so, but I guess you still have to be fairly confident to put on that fake bravado, as you call it. Don't you think? Right? You have to be able to push yourself out there to
Yes, I in that sense, yeah, you do have to be quite have something about you, but all of that stems from not being confident enough in my own sort of skill and my own ability and in who I am. And that's again something I've touched on in previous episodes. I'll probably continue to touch. I think that'll be kind of a theme for the
Yeah,
show going forwards.
but the reason I say it is like, you can sort of invite people over for parties all the time, and like this is a weird sort of topic, but for example, when I had my party last Saturday,
A great party it
it
was.
was a great party. Anyone who didn't attend, you should have. But I know it's stupid, but I was so nervous that actually no one would no one would turn up, and it would just be me, like, with this, who'd set up all of this with balloons and stuff, and then no one turn up. It would just be the saddest thing ever.
Wow.
And I feel like you may not have that. You're confident enough in yourself that if you invited people around, you know they'd come around. Like, I think there's still an element of confidence that I wish I could take from you and have. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's an interesting point. I had my birthday a couple of weeks ago now, and I certainly didn't feel the emotions that you're feeling. I'm really quite surprised to hear you say that, because certainly in our house that was an event that we were going to miss particularly quickly. Um, but yeah, no, I do get where you're coming from. Something that has interested me, and it's not on the sheet, but you've mentioned twice your sort of religious upbringing, and if you don't mind touching a little bit onto that segue, because I've got some fairly strong opinions on it, so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, then I'll interject
Yeah,
some
sure.
ideas.
So from about, I don't know, all the way up to maybe the age of, I want to say maybe 10. I think basically every Sunday I go to church with my sister and my grandma, and if it was a special event, my mum and my dad, but they normally like the lion. And there's there's a lot I do dislike about it. It's very, apologies, but it's quite boring. It's a lot of apologising for things that at the time I didn't understand what I was apologising for. But the sense of community afterwards, everyone was so kind. We'd go to the church house after, have a cup of tea, and we'd all just talk. And then most of the events in the village were based around the people that went to church. And again, as I said, the lessons in from the Bible and all of these different readings, I think, are really useful tools, and really good to live by, taking the politics, as I said, out of religion aside, which I think is what gives people a sort of dampened opinion on it. We're not moving into a massive religious debate, because that could go on for
That
ages.
could go on for a while.
But yeah, I enjoy the lessons of it.
Would you regard yourself a religious person now?
No, I wouldn't.
So what changed?
Um, See, I don't think I was ever a religious person.
You thought
I honestly did it more for my grandma, because she was really, really happy whenever we'd go, and it made her day, and so that's more why we did it. But it doesn't mean to say that what I learned from there wasn't important and hasn't influenced me. I think, they shouldn't just be religious lessons; they should be lessons that everybody learns.
for sure. No, that's a really interesting point. I mean, I'm certainly not a particularly religious guy. That was ever after I was diagnosed type 1 diabetic, I sort of lost a little bit of faith, and then I was diagnosed celiac sort of a year afterwards. That was the final nail in the coffin, if you will, which potentially is me being slightly selfish and not seeing the bigger picture, and I think I appreciate that more now I'm 23 than when I did when I was 13. But I certainly don't have many a good word to say about religion. Unless, except it does give people that sense of community, which I do agree. I certainly remember many Christmases in the not too distant past, and certainly when I've been over the legal drinking age, we've hit the pub beforehand, and then went to midnight mass on Christmas Eve, and midnight mass after a few, singing along to "Oh Come All Ye Faithful." is some memories that I'm going to hold on to.
Oh, it's great, isn't it? It's
Exactly.
the best.
I'm going to hold on to those for quite a long while. I don't necessarily agree with the policies and the concepts, if you like, but I do appreciate the sense of community, and that's something that I think in modern culture is lacking, that sort of togetherness, because we all live quite separate but never more connected lifestyles.
Yes. Did you say before you were diagnosed with diabetes that you were religious, or?
Okay, this is quite an interesting point. I would have said that I was, because I grew up in a fairly affluent background. My dad earns a decent amount of money, so I saw quite a lot of the world before I was particularly old. And we went camping in Italy. We were sat out looking over Lake Garda, which is one of the huge lakes in Italy. It's a great windsurfing spot, and that's one of the places where I learned my love for windsurfing, and that might be a different episode coming a little bit later. But we were sat out there, and it must have been 6:30, 7 o'clock, and the sun was sort of just setting, and this was the June of 2008. And my dad, I'll never forget, he said, there are a lot of things out there that are going to change your life. And then in the September of 2008, diagnosed type 1 diabetic.
Wow.
And I don't think he's certainly never heard me say something like that, but I think that moment has stuck with me for a very long time. I don't think I'll ever really forget that moment. I get quite emotional speaking about it now. You can hear my voice tremors a little bit more, but that sort of acceptance that no matter who you are in the world, there's going to be things that act as roadblocks, and that's certainly something I've had to deal with. So that changed it a little bit, that whole. So yeah, I would have said, in relation to your original question, yes, I would have said I was a fairly religious kid growing up, and then a lot of things happened, and I've sort of lost my way a little bit. Wow. Not to say that I won't in the future, but
yeah, it's sad, but I think, yeah, I do agree with the sentiment of what your dad said. I mean, there's so many things out there that can, well, I guess can be negative, but also like super positive, and they can change perspective in an instant. And I guess that's part of life.
Yeah, exactly. People get it with grievance, and when people pass away into the next life. And I certainly believe there's something else out there. I take faith in that, but I don't necessarily believe that God came down and created the world in 6 days. So I guess maybe I cherry pick a little bit, but I think a lot of people do. To be honest, I mean, if you're really honest with yourself, that's something that a lot of people do. So that was an interesting segue. It wasn't on the paper, but I feel like we've turned over a few new leaves. Yeah. So you mentioning about your calm nature and very considerate manner. That doesn't appear to be something you've had to develop. That seems to have come fairly naturally. In what way have you found that beneficial, and in what way has that been a slight drawback to your development?
Okay, so I found it, well, for the obvious reasons of it's been beneficial in making friends, but also keeping the peace. I've never really had a major conflict, and I think you could see that as an advantage or a disadvantage, really. On the one hand, it means, I guess I could say I've been slightly happier, having never had a massive conflict to deal with. But obviously, on the downside, never having a massive conflict means I'm not prepared for if I ever have a massive conflict, and I'm not particularly good at the moment at dealing with things like that. That is again one of my weaknesses. I think if I do get into an argument, I have a tendency just to start crying. Not because I'm like particularly sad, but just because like if I'm angry, that's just what happens. So on the downside, if I'm talking about how it's affected me, I think I've definitely taken sort of the sheltered approach to interacting with people, and I'd say in a lot of cases, because of that, I'm still quite socially awkward. I can't, as far as I'm concerned. You may have different views.
I disagree with your social awkwardness.
But when it comes to sort of
this rolls nicely into the next one.
Yeah. When it comes to sort of certain situations, maybe emotional situations, like 5 minutes ago. I was so out of my comfort zone. I never know what to say. And again, I think that's partly because I just haven't given myself enough of the other side of that.
A long enough lead, if you like.
Exactly, exactly.
To feel that
I've,
sort of
I've
emotion.
stuck to the same script the whole way through my life, and I'm only just sort of starting to change that. And so, yeah, it's something I'm working on, but it's difficult to change.
Undoubtedly, and that's a really interesting point. And when I was planning this episode, I had this idea that I've seen a number of people, especially the comic John Richardson talk about a lot, is the idea of everyone has their own sort of wave, and you can have people who have very high peaks and very high troughs, which is certainly myself, and I feel like you've got the ability to keep your wave a lot flatter than I can keep my wave, and potentially that means that you miss out on the highs that life has to offer,
Yes, yeah.
the flip side of that is that you miss out, you feel the lows a little bit less. That's an interesting way of looking at relationships. So yeah, relationships is something that I've spoken a little bit about before on the Confidentially Insecure podcast, and it's something that I've in some ways struggled with because I'm certainly someone who feels, as mentioned earlier, that everything quite intensely. I'm not very good at sort of taking myself out of situations. If someone does right by me or does wrong by me, that's something I feel pretty deeply, and I'm getting the impression that yourself, you don't find that quite as much. But I am interested in knowing what you look for in relationships and in friendships and that sort of thing.
Oh, blimey.
It's quite an open question, I know.
It is a very open question, but I think, because I did have to have a long think about this, because there's a lot of things for obvious reasons that I look for, but I think the main one for me was respect, because I think if you respect someone, it pulls into a lot of different categories as well. So honesty comes under respect, I'd say, and well, kindness is also to be respectful. Yeah, I can't think of any other descriptive words about friendship, but yes, respect, I think, for me covers most of the point.
That's an interesting point. Do you agree with the notion that to learn to be a good friend, you have to be one yourself, or do you think you have to, or do you disagree with that?
To learn to be a good friend, you have to be one yourself. So you have to be what, a good friend to
You have
yourself?
to be a good friend almost to yourself before you can learn to be a good friend to other people.
I think it certainly helps.
So I certainly agree that the relationship that you have with yourself affects the relationship you have with everybody else.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think it means to say you can't have a friendship, but if you're always hiding another side to yourself, then eventually it will come to light, and you want to be open and honest. As I say, if you're respectful and it's a true friendship, that it doesn't really matter what you're like. You don't need to put on a facade. So I think, yeah, I would agree with that. But I still think you could make a friendship work. Yeah.
Do you think you put on a facade when you started the university experience, or actually, better question, sorry, do you think you put on a facade going from secondary school, which you didn't sound like you liked, to moving to A level and college? Because it sounds like your A level and your sixth form in your secondary school were different places.
Yes, definitely. So I think so. Secondary school, I would agree with whatever anyone would say. Again, I avoided conflict, so I would just hang out with people who I didn't necessarily consider to be friends. A couple of them I did, but apart from that, not really. And I just kind of go along. But in sort of coming into A levels, I became my own person, and I think the sort of jokey side to me came out. I think there wasn't really a day where we weren't laughing during sort of break time or lunchtime, and I don't I it's definitely a sort of facade of joking around, but also it is just a part of who I am. I am just a naturally funny guy, of course.
Exactly.
um,
But I'd say one thing about Barnaby, he is naturally funny. He's very, very witty.
Indeed.
And I think sometimes that, especially at university, that I don't notice that. Then on the Nats trip, the classic, well, it could have been at least it wasn't somebody really weird, and then so just Sam. That's a story for maybe another time, or maybe you could recite that story now if you like.
I think they have to wait for another episode. We'll keep them engaged.
We'll keep them engaged. We'll do a Nats only special because I'll tell you my mental health went up and down like a yo-yo in a weekend. It was a big weekend for many reasons.
Yes. Yeah.
Not least, we played to a national level.
National level. We are that good.
We are that good at ultimate frisbee. Well, you are that good. You're a lot better at frisbee than I am. I think that's your more athletic background shining through that.
I'm gonna disagree with that.
I'll piss off. You're gonna disagree with that.
Well, when you do a good cannon throw, which is his signature throw, then you can't really beat it.
Yeah, when we hit 20 subscribers, I'll show everyone a cannon throw. I don't think that'll happen. I'm on 19 at the moment, so I probably will. But yeah, who knows?
But yeah, going back to your question.
Exactly. Yeah, sorry, it was a weird tangent.
A good tangent, but a weird one. Going back to sort of what was it? Sort of how I act and how I make friends. When I came to university, I think one of my first priorities was making friends as quickly as I possibly could, because I thought it would be a lot trickier down the line to make friends than if I, meet all my housemates straight away, and and then I can sort of get in with them, and then I can find other friends out of there, just to make myself comfortable and not feel alone, basically. Unfortunately, it didn't quite go to plan, because I ended up on the bottom floor of the student village, as it's known here at UWE, and
Big up UWE.
there was this third year guy who was wheelchair bound, and he was in my flat, and he had to have two carers, which also lived in my flat, and that only left one other person who didn't turn up for the first 2 weeks. So essentially, I was alone in the flat for the first week or so.
Joe, you never knew that anecdote about you.
Yeah, no, I was so stressed out, because I was like, I'm literally, this was the one thing I was banking on to try and make friends straight away. Outside of this, I didn't have, I didn't know where to go. Luckily, my girlfriend also happened to go to the same university and made some really good friends in her flat. So I kind of leached on, and I've made some really good friends from there. And you were the floor below, I believe.
I was the floor below, yeah. I wasn't quite in the quote-unquote frisbee flat. I wasn't quite that cool enough, no, but I was, just the floor below. Yeah. We've touched already on how I started playing. I didn't know that you moved in that scenario.
Yeah.
That must be quite especially moving to university stressful enough, but I think that must have really put the icing on the cake.
It was really stressful, because I knew a lot of people that had already started, making Facebook groups with their flat already, so they were already getting to know each other, and I had not been able to find anyone who was going to be in my flat, and I was getting super nervous about it. So again, like when I first was sort of introducing myself to people, I was pulling out all the stops. I was, trying to throw in jokes left, right, and centre, and just like, again,
potentially trying maybe a little bit too hard.
Maybe. I kind of reckon everyone was, because no one.
It's such a horrible experience.
Exactly, and it's only sort of about a couple of months in that you let down your guard a bit and start to relax. But it was exhausting. It was so tiring. Did you experience a similar thing?
Well, I didn't really. I was involved in the Facebook chat for my flat going into university, but I didn't really sort of connect with any of them, and that sort of remained true throughout the first year. And I'm incredibly thankful that I met lots and lots of different people for various different things down the road. Yes, I think I was trying quite hard to be light in that period, because it's, I mean, I'd lived away from home. I don't know if you had or not
No, I
before
never
university,
lived away from
and I think that plays a huge role into it. I'd with hindsight, but hindsight is always 20/20. I would suggest to other people that potentially moving out and living by yourself is better than going straight from college. I mean, personally, I didn't go straight from college. I had a year out because I failed on my A levels the first time around. So that put me into that situation already, which was really tough, and that's potentially another episode because all of my sixth form mates went off to university, and I was left at home in New Milton, which isn't quite the most exciting place to be. I mean, I saw a few of them throughout the year, but it was quite a tough period.
The same actually happened for me as well.
Did you?
I failed actually and nearly every single one of my A levels the first year. So I ended up doing an extra year as well. And again, going back to that sort of sibling rivalry, I felt a bit a bit like the not the weaker of the two, but the inferior of the two children. If we were going from like a smartness point of view and a who was doing better, could you be more proud of? That's another topic.
I'd love to touch on it because it's something that's come up today. I'm very proud of my sister. She's passed her three last year medical exams, so
Oh wow!
she's on her way to being a doctor, and I don't really know what my future looks like at this stage. So that's making me feel a little inferior in the eyes of my parents. So as you touched on, I didn't know you took another year. How did you find that after everyone from your college went off to university, and you sort of had to stay behind and give it another go?
It was difficult, but I think I always knew it was the right decision. And actually, I made sure that what I was getting out of it was worth the extra year first of all. And my parents were always very supportive of it, and also I'm really, really, really glad I took it because I was not ready for university in my second year of A levels. It's crazy how like you finish secondary school 2 years after secondary school, where you're doing like food technology and stuff. You're meant to know exactly what you want to do for the rest of your
I
life.
did food technology.
You didn't? You didn't?
I did.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Well,
I really like food technology. Big up anyone in food technology.
exactly. Yeah. No, it was
It was worth doing, yeah.
the best
Oh yeah.
best
Yeah.
lesson of the week. But yeah, I had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do, and I was not sort of mature enough or sort of socially ready, I want to say, to go. And so I'm really, really glad I've just taken the extra year to figure it out and gain that confidence. And I'm realizing now more, especially being at university where you get people of so many different sort of age brackets, that it really doesn't matter how long you take to achieve what you want to do. And I'm so, yeah, as I said, I'm really, really happy in the end that I took that actually.
Oh, undoubtedly. I'm to follow on from what you said. I completely agree. I didn't see it at the time as being quite such a useful thing. My parents really encouraged me to take a year out and try again with the A levels. And it was, I think, my own sort of ego and my own self confidence was hit a little bit by the fact that I had to do another year and everyone else was going off and doing these incredible things and seeing these incredible places and experiencing new things that you do get at university. And I don't think I really believed that I'd ever get to that stage, which is clearly untrue because I've had a really good time over the past 3 years, and it's certainly benefited my degree to have done this extra year. I then went straight into foundation, I think, as you did as well.
Yes, yeah.
So because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and that again, I mean, it's another year out, and I'm not getting any younger. I'm 23 now, and I'm only in my second year, but I don't, as you said, I don't think it matters how quickly you reach the finish line. It's about the journey. I had to get that in at some stage. It not being about the destination, but about the journey. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a mental health podcast anymore.
Perfect. You've ticked the box. Well done.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I can tick that one off. I think I mentioned that we live connected but separate lives at one stage as well. So that's another box ticked.
Indeed.
So I'm ticking all of the boxes today. So we might repeat ourselves a little bit here, but if you could give one piece of advice to Barnaby on the last day of your sixth form career that you know now that you didn't know then, what would that be?
Oh, blimey. That is a difficult question. Do you know what you'd say? Because I'm
Do you want to
struggling.
flip on me, do you?
Yeah, I'll flip it on you quickly.
I'd tell myself to really want more things because from now on I want a interesting and surprising life, and I want to be generous and kind to people as they've been to me, and I want to have a group of people around me who are proud of the successes that I have. But if I were to fail, I wouldn't want to lose myself or lose that as well. I think the desire's there at the moment, which wasn't there then.
Okay, that's a really good one. I think for me it's either to sort of relax a bit more. I've been sort of I'm getting so stressed out about my university work, and I always say to sort of everyone I just don't have enough time. And I think that's the thing. If you don't make the time, you're never going to have enough time. So I guess priorities and making sure you're I guess organizing. I'm not sure it's about organization, but just taking every step, slowly, one at a time. Don't try to rush into things, and it will all be okay in the end.
I think you've hit the nail on the head right there. It'll all be okay in the end. Because I think at 18, leaving sixth form and then starting university, it feels like if this doesn't work out, then it's all on the kibosh. And there are plenty of people who show that isn't the case. And what you've said just there is very, very paramount to that fact. Speaking of university stuff, I've found launching this and trying to do a degree and do assignments and do all of that to the level that I'm proud of very difficult. I found my workload with this has increased dramatically, and it's nice to know that you're not immune to the fact that it is difficult. There is a lot on. I mean, you had a part-time job at one stage, and I assume you quit that due to that reason. Or?
Yes, definitely. I was just juggling too many things, and I think the other issue was so the first couple of years I was, I guess, it's kind of a good and bad thing to compare your work with other people, but it really depends on who you're comparing your work with. For example, the first couple of years I was, asking some of my friends, "Oh, have you done the work?" And they'd be like, "No, I haven't done it." And so suddenly,
You feel better.
yeah, I feel better and I feel more relaxed. Whilst now my sort of motivation is to look at the sort of people I more aspire to be and look at their work and go, "Wow, that's the sort of standard I want to hit." Not to say that comparing yourself to other people can't be dangerous; it can be very detrimental. And I have also found that a lot of people have a lot more time on their hands than I do to get this quality of work. And I think I have, I have really struggled with my time management because I'm trying to hit a quality that just isn't possible with the amount of time I can give it compared to other people. So yeah, I guess going back to your last question about what would you tell yourself is not to compare yourself to other people who, when you don't know their scenario, their situation as well.
I think that's a great point, and the point you raised about comparing yourself to other people and feeling okay. I'd There's a great Sully Breaks. I don't know if any of you guys listen to him. I listen to him regularly throughout my sort of sixth form and secondary school days. But he does a great bit on friendship, and he essentially says that the old mantra is that if you want to know yourself, you look at your five closest friends. That works to an extent, and sometimes that does benefit you. But if you look at the A level grades that you got did you all get accepted into the same place? Maybe one of you got accepted to a really top class university, and some of you guys didn't. And that's not. I'm a big believer that you can make wherever you end up work for you, but be aware that the people that you surround yourself dictate what happens to you and have a huge impact on you. And the ultimate benefit is that eventually you'll find ways that benefit each other within that 5 people. So you'll have your outgoing friends, you'll have your studious friends, you'll have your friend who just makes sure everything's all right, and you kind of balance each other out. But so I'm not saying pick your friends, but pick your friends based off their strengths and what they're going to bring to your life, I guess.
But I guess again, most importantly is we dictate or you dictate what happens to you. That's
exactly.
Like, you can choose your friends. I guess that is you dictating that. But you can have whatever friends you want. But if you have that drive to do it, you can do it. And I'm getting into that sort of inspiration.
Exactly. I feel like we're getting a little into a hole here.
Into this big-headed mirror. You can do it, but you can do it. Trust me.
Exactly. Yeah. So from 2 people who failed their A-levels in the foundation year and have now ended up at uni, you can achieve what you set out to.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to move on to some closing questions then. So, closing questions. I feel like I've brought you on for the last hour to give you a good grilling. Is there anything that you wanna ask me to flip it on its head a little bit?
See, I didn't think of anything to grill you, but was there anything that I've said that sort of resonated with you, or you didn't expect, or I guess anything that surprised you, or you know?
Barnaby, you've always surprised me from day one, mate. From day one in Brecon Court, playing Ring of Fire, whatever we did to start off. You've always come in with something to surprise me. And I think the thing that I'll take away from this conversation is how you talked about sort of your anxiety throughout. Because just 3 weeks ago I left a lecture because I just felt so. I basically got a panic attack in lecture, where I don't normally happen. But I just felt really, really uncomfortable and really sort of really panicked by that. It got to the stage where I actually got up out of a lecture, which sort of gives you a significance of the situation. And it's nice to know that other people are also feeling anxious. Maybe just not quite that extent, but everyone sort of displays it in different ways. And I think there's no shame in displaying it in whatever way that you need to display it. So that's really what's resonated with me. And I feel like you've come on and you've not been confidentially insecure. You've just sort of been insecure, if you like.
I think the thing about this that I'm really enjoying is that as I've been talking and sort of reflecting on, well, I guess my life really, I've noticed my achievements and I've seen where I've come from, and it's really, really nice just to look back and to remember that things weren't as good as they are now, and how far I've come, and it does make me really proud. I'm really happy with how things are turning out, and I think what you were saying about you getting panic attacks as well, I think everyone, well, literally everyone, will be insecure, is going to be nervous, and this is the beauty of this podcast. It's it's opening up about it, and I'm really, really happy I've done it. It's therapy for me. It's been a real therapeutic journey, and I've really, really enjoyed it so far.
That's what I find. I find my solo episodes are absolute. I get so much out of them, especially last week's. Last week's really episode 3 took it out of me. I went for quite a long walk by myself after I'd uploaded it. Because once it's uploaded, I can't really do anything about it, and that was something that sort of resonated with me. It felt really cool to get it off my chest. I knew it was something that had been bothering me for a long while now. So go check out episode 3 if you haven't, and episode 2. They're both really important. But I think that whole message about the fact that you can speak with such admiration and pride in yourself about where you started and where you've gone to, and I'm sure. I know your work ethic. You work a lot harder than a lot of people I know at university, and you've certainly got something about you. And I'm sure this is only the start of the incline. There's the top of the mountain we haven't quite reached yet, and I'm excited to find out where that is. I'm sure you are as well.
No, I'm looking forward to see. I think you've got this. There's going to be millions of viewers on this podcast. Mark my words. You'll come back to this
Episode.
this little episode prediction for 2020, the end of 2022. Let's do it.
End of 2022.
Yeah, million views.
Million?
Yeah, let's do it.
Christ.
But
I'm aiming for 1,000 followers by the end of 2022.
okay, that's a.
I'm on 35 at the moment, so there's a long way to go.
Okay, well, maybe 1 million was a bit. But anyway, a goal's a goal. But yeah, I would recommend to sort of anyone listening to this is just to kind of reflect and write down a bit about you know, your personality maybe, and see if you can sort of notice anything about maybe insecurities, because when I was first given the questions for this podcast, I sat down, as I said earlier, at about 11 p.m. and I just wrote loads of paragraphs, and you know, it was the first time I kind of thought about maybe my kindness as not just being something that I'm, you know, I've been born with or whatever, but maybe something that's a bit of a shield, and it's been really interesting just to give myself a bit of attention. It's not actually that many times that I'll think about myself in that particular way. So I would highly recommend that everyone else gives it a go. It's been really, really beneficial.
I'm glad to hear that. It's been an incredible conversation, and it does feel a little bit sad we're going to have to wrap it up in the not too distant future. But I've learned a lot. I've felt supported in my own anxieties, my own sort of self-doubt, and I think that's an incredible thing. The penultimate question: what's the best gift you've ever received, and why?
Ooh, okay. Again, this is going to sound sort of soppy and cheesy, but my mum and dad, oh blimey, it's got to be maybe 5 years ago, went to Namibia, which is just north of South Africa, for those who don't know. And there's a bit of a story behind this gift. It's it's a poor country, but also it's not very well visited. You don't get a lot of tourists there. So anyway, they were driving into the supermarket, and this person would come up to you and ask you if you want your car looking after while you go into the supermarket, and they charge like maybe 50 pence or something. And anyway, they ask for your names before you go in, and then you go into the shop, and on the way, when you return to your car, they would have carved these little carved from these little sort of tree nuts your name and a couple of little animals or something. So eventually they said their names were Barnaby and Florence, whilst being my sister, and they took them home with them and gave them to us. And I think that the more I sort of look at that keyring, I really enjoy it. It's such a cool little gift, and I love the story behind it. It's travelled, you know, across the world, and I don't know. It's sentimentally, it's really important to me.
You can't put a price on sentiment. I think it's a really interesting question. I'll be honest, I stole that one from one of the episodes of Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett, and I might steal another idea from him, but I feel like I might rip him off if I did that. But anyway, that's by the by. I think that's a really interesting. I thought you were going to say something far more flamboyant, but that sums it all up. It's not the you can't put a price on sentiment, as I said earlier. It's something that means a lot to you, and it's an incredible story, and it's come from somebody in a car park in Namibia, and now it's one of your most prized possessions. I think that's an incredible thing to me.
It's great. I really like it. And it's also the first thing that came to mind, which I think in general means it's one of the most important things.
For sure. So we've touched a few times, and this is going to be the final question. We've touched a few times on memories and what happens afterwards, and what happens after death, and God and religion and all that. So I'm just going to leave you with this last question. When when your time comes, what do you want to be said about you?
Ooh. Um, I guess. Ooh, that's a really difficult question. Because before we had it scripted down as what is your legacy or whatever. But I guess
It's a similar question.
It's very similar. So I'll go with the legacy one. I think one of the reasons I went into architecture was because there are so many little things that I just don't think have been considered for around people. I don't think there's enough consideration nowadays around people. It's so money driven, and although I'm sure I'm going to face the exact same issues with budgets, etc., if I can just make that one little small detail at a bus stop where it improves someone's life, it makes people smile or happy. It's not the generic bus stop, for example, and people will look at that and just raise their own mental health a little bit. I think that's the sort of legacy I want to leave. It's that little. It's the small things. I think that's it. That little something that someone will look at and just go, that's really nice, you know.
That's such a great answer, and it's been so befitting of the rest of the podcast, especially with the Namibia story, and now the fact that you want to change little things. Mate, I've had a lovely time. I've enjoyed this chat far more than I could ever imagine.
It's been really great. I have to say I was nervous coming on, but I'm so glad I had this conversation. It's been really interesting, and I would love to do it again. Maybe
I'm sure
100 podcasts in your 100 podcast special potentially.
I'm sure I'll have you on again. So as I said in the mission statement, this is an ordinary podcast for the ordinary person that just might have extraordinary results. Keep liking it, keep sharing it, keep subscribing, keep your mental health a priority, and I'll see you again next time.